for those of you online. It's my pleasure today. It's another computer science speaker today. So we have Justin Knapp. He's from Full Visibility LLC, where he's vice president of mission engineering and cyber. He's going to take us on he's a CS alum from 2005. He spent 17 years at Booz Allen Hamilton. So he has that, understands that side of the business that he's, well, he has an MBA from some other school. I didn't even look because it wasn't VirginiaTech, right? But that's all right. And a couple of his folks from his company are here today. So with that, let's welcome Justin. Look forward to your talk.
Thanks, Kirk. Good afternoon, everybody. No surprise, my name is Justin Knapp, and that's me up there. Full disclosure, I didn't build these slides. I actually used a new site called faces.app. It's actually one of the Face app founders created it. So I took all my notes from the speech that I wanted to talk about, threw it in there. I threw some pictures. I kind of chuckled at this one. It kind of has me hovering in this funny squat that kind of looks like, I'm doing something else, but wanted to start with a little bit of child humor. And you'll see later on in the slide deck some interesting things that were put in here. I decided to leave them in there. I thought it'd get us somewhat of a laugh or, lighten the mood a little bit. So thank you everybody for coming. A little nervous. This is one of the first times I've done kind of a speech at this level for this length of time. So hopefully you'll find it interesting. I also want to thank Lindsay Tolar, who first brought the idea of me talking during a class to this, actually upstairs on the 8th floor. Also want to thank Dr. Julian, who I met as well and kind of heard her vision for the department, which is pretty interesting, and I've stayed connected with her. We're going to meet up pretty soon, so excited about that. And Dr. Cameron, who I had the pleasure with, spend the afternoon, learned a lot about him, kind of where he wants to go with the Institute for Advanced Computing, which he corrected me. So good new name. But all right, enough of that obligatory thanks. Probably asking, what the heck's this guy doing here? Why do I have to listen to him for 40 minutes? I know it was optional. Don't worry. I had the same thoughts when they actually asked. A little bit of imposter syndrome, which is typical within my career. As Kirk said, currently the Vice President of Mission Engineering and Cyber at Full Visibility. What does that mean? So at Full Visibility, I'm focused kind of around three things. BD growth within the DoD, DOW space. A little bit around delivery as we win contracts and start to support the DoD. I focus on the delivery aspect, making sure everything from a contract standpoint is executed flawlessly. And then also have been helping out from an operations. Full Visibility is a small business, about 125 team members, and we're looking to ensure we have different processes and things in place so that we can scale, so that we can bring some of the great stuff we do to other markets of the US government. So during my first few questions with Lindsay, or conversations with Lindsay, I shared a little bit about kind of my career, how I started a computer science at Virginia Tech, learned about software development, and I've now grown into a different leadership role that, might not be expected from someone who started as a software developer. But I kind of want to talk through that. And I know in conversations with her, there were some discussions around, hey, some of our students aren't really sure what's going to happen with the AI advancements. What does really computer science mean to that? So I'm here just to kind of provide a different path and share my experiences with you, some of the things I've learned. So hopefully you get a lot out of it. But either way, this is cool. I'm really excited, and we'll get going. So like I said, I'll share a little bit around advice I learned, share some stories of success, failure. I'll share a little bit about some of the cool projects I've been able to work on. And really what I want to show is, hey, master of a technical skill is great, but it's not the only thing that's going to lead to success. So you may be the best developer, in the building, but that's only going to take you so far. And hopefully I could share kind of how that's happened and some things you'll use in your career. So just quick, I was supposed to go to the next slide. Leave that for a second. I'll talk through Virginia Tech, some of my early days in my career, and then talk through growing into leadership different perspectives, and then leave with some advice and takeaways. Quick spoiler, I've not invented anything. I've not written a research paper. I haven't testified on the Hill yet. I haven't saved any lives directly, but hopefully some of the work that I did actually did indirectly save lives, and I'll get into some of that stuff as well. So that's me, the funny looking guy with a hat. I really like this picture. It makes me look taller than my wife, which is not the case. You know, she strategically stood a little bit lower, 3 kids and my dog. So I'm just a kid from upstate New York, about an hour east of Syracuse, and I happened to pick a warm weekend to visit Blacksburg. It was April. I left upstate New York with snow on the ground and showed up to 70-degree weather and absolutely fell in love with Blacksburg. Told my parents, hey, if I get in, I'm going to go here. Keyword there is if. I'm going to be a little bit honest about myself and might not paint myself in the best light, but it's who I am. I've had enough humbling experiences to not let my head get any bigger than it is. So in high school, I was an idiot. I got by doing what needed to get done. I didn't put any effort in. I didn't bring any schoolwork home. Fortunately, I had a good enough SAT score and enough of a little bit of a brain to get good grades without really working. So I look back and think, hey, would I have taken a different path if I had focused more in school? But I don't necessarily regret it. So when I was in high school, I bought my first computer from PC Mag for $500. It was a long time ago. I built the computer based on my dad pushing me and motivating me. And for those that don't know, the first time I got on the internet after the AOL days was using Net Zero. Has anybody heard of Net Zero? It was free internet that put an ad on the top of your browser screen. So because I wasted all my money on the computer, I had to use Net Zero. But it was kind of the starting point for my curiosity around technology. And I won't say love for technology. A lot of people say love. Mine is much more around curiosity. What can I learn there? My parents gave me a choice, college or the military. I couldn't get out of upstate New York fast enough. And I was looking through US World News, and they ranked VirginiaTech, I think around 30 in terms of computer science programs. It was the one school I think I could have got into. So I went ahead and I applied. I chose computer science because it had computer in the name. And that's the brain that I had in high school. That's just how it's like, computers, I like those. Let's go do something there. So I had no idea what I was getting into. I took the mindset of I'll figure it out, which is something I've done in my career a lot, is made the jump, made the leap, and I'll figure it out. Sometimes I failed. Sometimes I figured it out, and it led to greater things. But alone, when I was younger, I had an agile approach, right? Software developers understand kind of agile. I did agile with my life, which turned out all right. So this is my wife, Kristen, Grayson, Sophie, and Charlotte. And then Kona is the big dog there. They definitely take up a lot of my free time, and I'm very fortunate. So, all right, I get to Blacksburg, and I realize there's cows on campus, and I'm not happy. I wanted to move out of upstate New York to get away from the cows and the farms. But my first 2 months in Blacksburg weren't easy. And I'm sure as an undergrad, that's typical. Once my parents drove away, I didn't know a single person. So it was a big, big shock to me. In August, I'm spending my time figuring out school, figuring out the social circles, how to catch a bus to a frat party from Castle. And, how do I not gain the freshman 15? And I had this brilliant idea of, let me go talk to the wrestling coach and talk about walking on. So with everything there, I'm like, I'll walk on the wrestling team. Another one of those figure out moments. I'll figure it out. Told me to come to practice and see what I can do. So here I am, 1 month into school, taking computer science classes, meeting new people, and I go and join the wrestling team. First semester, I struggled a lot. I got home for Thanksgiving break, and I would say I had a little bit of a minor meltdown. Definitely cried because I just was homesick, didn't know what the heck I was doing. There was so much, it was overwhelming, school, this, that. But my parents instilled in me, you don't quit anything. So went back to Blacksburg, and I'm very happy that I actually went back. Things settled. I got back into somewhat of a routine, got my butt kicked in the wrestling room every day. But I really got to experience what it was like being around people that are smarter than you. That's one thing I do remember from the time walking into class, talking to different peers and students. And that's really where I kind of started to build this desire to continue to challenge myself, push myself, and just find something that I wanted to learn, right, around curiosity and everything. So back to, first, second year at VirginiaTech. I ended up only making it on the wrestling team until my sophomore year. I made a goal that I was going to crack the starting lineup, so I focused on wrestling. I worked out 3 to 4 times a day, and that meant computer science classes actually took a back seat to what I was focused on. And I failed. I couldn't accomplish both of it. I could not do the amount of training that was required to crack the starting lineup and pass the classes. So I ended up my first semester of my sophomore year completing 13 credits with a GPA of 1.7. Okay, 1.7. I was a little scared of telling my parents, but they were great. They understood, and I ended up quitting the wrestling team. Right. So my parents said, "Hey, you being a bad wrestler." Actually, they didn't say this. I said this. You being a bad wrestler might not take you as far as being a smart student and getting a degree. So I learned, hey, sometimes you have to fail and quit, even though it's not good, just to kind of get to where you go. And then as I started to prepare for this talk, I actually ordered a copy of my transcript because I wanted to throw it up here. I now look at it and remember I was pretty bad at college. Kirk told me he might have been as well. I was pretty bad. It's embarrassing, so I'm not going to throw it up there. To try to spin zone and make light of it, I was actually really bad at math class, but I was overall pretty good with my computer science classes. Averaged kind of a B+ in computer science classes. I didn't do the average around math classes because I had 5 Ds over 4 years, including a D- in vector geometry. Wild, that semester I actually ended with like a 3.1 with a D-. I don't remember a single thing of vector geometry, obviously. So one of the, got back to tech, figured all that out after that semester, decided I was going to focus solely on school. And the rest of my time at Virginia Tech was amazing. A little less eventful. I got in the groove of college life and built a lot of relationships that I still have today. I've got a good group of buddies that I still talk to pretty much every day, and they were built during my time at Virginia Tech. It also is where I learned how to write C++ code. I learned how to create linked lists, first in, first out, and then I also learned about rebuilding the Linux kernel. And in 2005, that took a long time. So I do remember I'd write some changes to the kernel, you kick off the rebuild, go grab food at West End, come back and realize I left a semicolon out somewhere and have to start the whole process. So I don't know why I vividly remember that, but it was all of that to say it was an eye-opening experience that to be successful, you have to work extra hard and things aren't going to be easy. So high school, I got through. I didn't have to work really hard. I knew with what I learned at Virginia Tech that I was going to have to grind in work and life. And by grind, I mean you really focus, you really work, and you really put in the extra hours. And I said grind and work in life. Blacksburg is also where I developed 2 different Justins. I developed a 210 Knapp, and then I also developed a professional Justin. So when you hear that, you're probably going to think this guy's a fraud. That's not the case. I don't act differently. I just allow different sides of my personality to come out in business as well in social circles. We are, as humans, are really dynamic individuals. Everyone's got multiple elements to them. If I'm hanging out with some of my wrestling buddies, I'm not going to talk around continuous integration, continuous deployment benefits for your software program. I'm going to talk around how Coach Roby is doing so great with the wrestling team. Very similar within kind of a professional environment. 210 Knapp actually came from our townhouse in Pheasant Run, and I'll just leave that to your imagination. I won't talk in there. So again, uneventful for sophomore, junior year. Senior year is where I, at the push of my parents, ended up going to the VT Career Center. And in November of my senior year, after a couple interviews, flying up to McLean, I got a job offer from Booz Allen. So I signed that in November. Graduated. When I graduate, my salary was going to be $55,000. So that was in 2005. And let me tell you, having a signed offer for a job in September meant for a really fun spring semester. So growing into leadership, right? Started 10 days after I graduated from Virginia Tech with Booz Allen. Not the best move. I suggest, when you guys finish up grad school, take a little bit of time. Because for me, once I started working, I was going to work until I retired, which is coming at 55. So my initial approach to work, you can see it, I was going to be married to my work. I just wanted to make a lot of money and I wanted to be super successful. My initial motivation once I graduated was to make money so I didn't have to drive a 4-speed Nissan Sentra, and I could pay off my credit card bill from eating McDonald's dollar menu senior year. So I didn't have any other motivations. It was I want to make money and figure it out. And be careful, because once you get into that work world and that career, that you spend most of your time there, that's going to be part of your brand. That's going to be what you focus on. Your friends are going to shrink. You'll quickly get lost in the grind of the day-to-day. You've got to make sure you're taking a step back, looking at what you're doing, making sure you're kind of on the right path. Otherwise, you're going to, snap your fingers and it's going to be several years later to be like, what the heck just happened? So talk around, started as a software developer, working for Booz Allen, supporting a government clients. And a few years into my career, my current project lead left. My boss hired a new guy to come in. I spent 6 months training him up on how to do the job. And then he bolted. He left. He said, this isn't what I want to do. I'm going to take off. So talking to my boss, he opened up a new job rec, was going to bring another person in. And talking with peers and friends, it's like, hey, why don't you just go in and do that? Why don't you go to your boss and say you could do that? Very hesitant, didn't know my role, but ultimately ended up doing that. My boss at the time said, that sounds great. You can start doing that. You can become the tech lead. You can become the PM. So that was my first opportunity for being a leader. And that was strictly, the impetus was to make sure that I wasn't annoyed by training somebody up for the next few months just for them to leave. So if I didn't look back, didn't have confidence in my ability, who knows where I would have went. I never would have had that opportunity. So back to making a lot of money. Like I said, that was my initial motivation. And then I started to support the FBI. And my motivation started to slowly shift from making money to actually doing impactful work, making a contribution, keeping the country safe. And it allowed me to work on some pretty cool projects, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Throughout those, first few years of leadership, I had a lot of mistakes. I learned a lot of things. One story is we had a software deployment that we were going to happen to do. Same day that we were going to do it, my car broke down on 95, so I had to get a ride into work. That deployment was a pure disaster. We worked until probably 2-3 o'clock in the morning. And then I had to make matters worse, I then had to ask my client, who was not happy, if he could drive me halfway home to meet somebody for a ride. Mind you, it was like a 45-minute drive for me. He drove me 25 minutes. I met somebody. But it was awful. It was bad. Fortunately, we were able to get it back up and running. The next day, my boss, who became one of my great mentors in my professional life, came, stood up my cube and asked, what went on, what went wrong, blah, blah, blah. And then he asked, hey, is this going to happen again? And my immediate gut was like, no, sir, it's not going to happen again. Right? Which probably everybody, he said, wrong. It's going to happen again. but you're going to let me know right away. So I ended up getting taught in a special way, that you need to communicate. You need to let people know when things go bad right away, right? Because it only is going to lead to more problems. So it was a great lesson learned. I don't know if it happened again, but I don't know. So one thing about me as well is I'm my own worst critic. I don't like to fail, and I'm constantly striving to improve. I started to realize, being very critical, that I wasn't a great developer. I was around a lot of smarter people. They were better developers than me. And I realized, like, hey, if I'm going to be successful, I need to kind of grow skills elsewhere. And maybe this project management or leadership role is something for me. So that's where I went off, and I decided to go get my MBA. I knew I had the technical knowledge, skills, but I didn't have the business acumen. I needed to build that up. And MBA sounded like, yeah, you'll learn that. So I went and started that. I still won't say where that was. It wasn't Virginia Tech, but I did that for the next 2.5 years. So I really learned what it takes to do a full-time job plus part-time grad school. And really all it was is I just didn't have a life for 2.5 years. It was just school, work, and that's it. But it really gave me the tools that I will use later on in my career, but also gave me more knowledge that I really don't know anything. It's kind of a weird thing, but I got my MBA in 2013. And then for the next 9 years, I just worked. Every day I strived to improve, just worked, checked off thousands of to-dos. I dealt with some significant crises at work. I worked on projects that were boring. They didn't challenge me. But there was nothing really glamorous about it. It was just 9 years of every day going in, working, and making sure that I continued to grow myself, right? So that's a long time. I'm bad at math. I don't know, 2,800 days or something? I don't know. But all that's to say is my path from being a developer to kind of a leader within multiple projects didn't happen overnight. It happened over 9 to 10 years. I've always had this curiosity when you see, CEOs, COOs on TV, or you read about them in the news, you think, how do they get there? And I've realized it's just continuous grind. It takes time, and it'll eventually happen if you set yourself right. A couple other things during those 9 years, I did always pursue, going to the big leagues, going with some of the FANGs, right? Facebook, Apple, Amazon. During those 9 years, I went through 2 interviews with Amazon, didn't get a job offer. I went through an interview with Google, did not get a job offer. I blame that on the DC internet. No lie, 5 minutes before I was going to jump on with my second interview, my internet went out. So this was at 5 p.m. Eastern time, and I drove from DC to Alexandria to go jump in the basement of a friend's apartment. And then got on and got asked to solve a problem, and I just, it was bad. I solved it an hour too late, and I tried to send an email to the interviewer that, hey, I solved the problem, and didn't get a reply. But so I never made it to the big leagues, but it was probably a blessing in disguise, because I really like where kind of I am now. During those 9 years, I worked with a lot of different people, several different companies and partners. One of the companies that stood out all through that was Full Visibility. I worked a lot with them, brought them in on different projects, and these guys that are in the room, they always just showed up. They were committed. I knew when I jumped on the phone with Rob that I needed to have everything ready to go, because he was going to challenge me and keep me honest. So they really stood out. They're Virginia Tech graduates, and we instantly formed a bond because of our experience in Blacksburg. And we really worked through some challenges and project issues because we had a kind of a mutual level of respect. Some of these projects included getting an FBI agent to go to somebody's house. So it was some serious things that we worked through. So I have up here as well as a perspective shift. So I ended up marrying my best friend, and we started a family. Kids and marriage is a huge pivot and a huge thing for me. I'm very fortunate to have 3 beautiful, healthy, and amazing children. And one of the big things for me in my life that led the perspective shift is as we were preparing for the birth of Sophie, our middle child, we received the diagnosis of Down syndrome in utero. I won't get into the emotional roller coaster, but there was a little bit of a grieving period as we got that diagnosis, which I now look back and I've got a lot of like self-hatred for myself and kind of how I handled that. Because right now we're probably the most fortunate, lucky parents alive because of the experiences that we've had, the people we've made connections with through Sophie. And, because of Sophie, I've been able to run from LA to Vegas while we raised $100,000 on a relay team. I've run from DC to New York. We raised about 150 grand. So I look back and realize that, hey, that's really changed a lot of things. I've got some great experiences, but it also taught me that based on some of the people I met, no matter what you're going through, somebody else has it worse, right? So if you're at work and you're going through a crappy project or there's a major issue, for me, it helped realize like, hey, this isn't bad. There's light at the end of the tunnel. It's going to change. And that perspective has shifted for me based upon some things that I've done in life. And, I wrote down having panic attacks because of a client project just didn't seem to matter, right? There's no point in having a panic attack. There's bigger and better things. You'll figure it out. So as life was changing for my family, I had been expanding my area of responsibility in Booz Allen. This meant leading more projects, more people. And I joke, which might be true, is, there's a difference between leadership and management. Management is basically being an adult babysitter, right? You're babysitting adults, making sure they're doing the work and everything. Leadership is completely different. Leadership's about connecting with people, finding what motivates them, and being influential. You need to build trust with the people you work with that are both less experienced and those that have more experience that you report up to, right? So there's the whole managing up, managing down. I think there's also the leading up, leading down. And as a leader, you need to take ownership and accountability. And I realized through those 9 years of grinding and that, leadership means about putting people in front of you. In terms of success, it really is about how you help them. And I can say that I'm happy now when someone I work with or I lead is more successful. That's really what I get joy out of now. So it's become less around, what have I done great? It's more around, hey, what are the people around me doing great? So as I grew in Booz, I spent, a ton of time building relationships. And I felt it was necessary to have kind of a slide here around relationships make careers. The AI knew I wanted it, so it put it in there. One thing I learned through that multiple meetings was to find common ground with other people, right? Whether it's about your love of sports, running, or my kids, or the hate of the Yankees, the love of the Commanders. I went in my career and I put in the extra effort to meet and connect with people. I was taking PTO so that I could drive from client site to our corporate office in McLean, so I could just go and walk the halls and meet people. Because I knew if stuff was going to hit the fan, I wanted those people on speed dial that I could call and I could trust. And interesting enough, I despise is probably the right word, the whole networking aspect of my current job. I do not like the 2 to 3 minute conversations where you say, hey, blah, blah, blah. I really am driven by that second and third conversation that you have with someone, that you really truly learn about them, right? And in my role at Full Visibilities, kind of the first time I've done true BD. And I don't like the conferences. I like those second meetings after, where you really get to know a person. And just in 2 years, I've built some pretty, what I would consider friends now through some of the work because I've built that relationship. The other thing I've learned is never take yourself too serious. Self-deprecating humor is great, right? Making fun of yourself really kind of brings everybody's guard down. Another story around kind of leadership that I learned is I was leading a development team. Client allowed us to bring a remote developer on who was out in California, asked him to build some billing functionality and financing functionality into a system. And here he was, senior resource. I just trusted him, kind of let him go, let him build the system, checked in periodically. It came to about a couple days before the deadline. The client kept asking, hey, where we are. I went out to this resource. I got on. I said, hey, tell me where you are. Next thing he said was, hey, I'm not as far as I wanted to. I had this issue. I had that issue. I'm not going to meet the deadline. So could have went in. I could have jumped in and helped. But instead, what I did is I went into the client's office and I laid it all out there, right? I told him, I said, hey, we're not going to hit the deadline. And he said, oh, well, I don't know if he asked me whose fault it was, or he said, what happened? And I took ownership. I said, hey, I'm the leader of the team. I did not check in enough with my team. I did not give them enough direction. I didn't have the right milestones. It's my fault. Client laughed at me and said, I know what you're doing, but I actually respect you for it. And that client alone, I worked with for probably the next 10 years. And we had a really solid relationship because he could trust me. And prior to leaving Booz Allen, I went in and told this client that I was leaving, and he cursed at me, and I won't repeat it, but he said, I just got you $22 million of work, and you're going to leave. And I said, sorry, it's time. But that moment was, I think, that first step in our relationship building, because he could trust me. He knew I wasn't going to give him a line of BS, but he also knew that I was a good leader and was going to stand up for my team. So that was, a foundation that was built on trust and honesty. Relationships make career. Something I look back in undergrad, I was probably more worried about making friends and having a good time, as opposed to building a relationship with the alumni network, right? And they all talk about networking and everything else. So I do look back and say I probably should have built. Same thing with grad school. I didn't build a really solid relationship with some of my cohort students. So that's one thing I look back, and a little bit piece of advice is really focus on networking, the alumni group, because you will be able to leverage those connections in the future. And in my current role, I'd say about 90% of getting work for us, full visibility, is about relationships. 10% is about what we can bring. We go and we meet with different partners, and there are different companies in our space that have somewhat of similar capabilities, but the teaming partners that we're looking to join, when they come down to, hey, two different companies, are they going to select company A or B? They're going to select the company that they like to work with. And that's been something that's really helped us. So building those relationships is led to some of our success. A couple other things on relationships. I made it appropriate here for this presentation. Don't be mean. But there's a different statement that I'd probably say somewhere else about don't be whatever. But that's something you need to take, right? You need to treat people how you want to be treated. I know it's an elementary school, be kind, but it is what you need to do in your career. Another one is around knowing your audience. Talked a little bit about kind of two different personalities. That's one of them. One of our colleagues shared a story as we were kind of talking through this, and she was going to actually interview for, or going to a job fair, and she actually brought a paper resume, right? And this wasn't that many years ago. She actually brought a paper resume where everybody was moving to digital. And actually they said one of the variables of why she got the job is because she brought a paper resume. So she kind of understood the audience, knew that there was, different, different age groups, right? Different millennials, Gen Boomers, everything. So she knew there. Another thing, and I'm sure you guys have heard this, everything's going digital. Everyone's doing FaceTime. Everybody's doing Teams and Zoom. I can't stress enough around showing up in person. That has been very, very beneficial for me. And I tend, any relationship that I'm starting to build, I really try to show up in person. I try to grab coffee, try to grab lunch. Making that in-person connection is super, super important, has been really helpful for me. So a couple things there. Back to this 8 and 9 year period at Booz Allen, where I went to work, delivered day in and day out. Immediate gratification is a lie. Like you've got to put the hours in 8 to 9 years of just working. One of the others is story here around kind of taking on new things in a meeting and going around the room. Hey, who wants to lead this $500 million contract pricing? I've never worked on a pricing proposal before this, but I was dumb enough to say, hey, I'll do it. It's one of those situations where it's like, great, I'm going to learn new things. And then Friday, Saturday morning, 2 days before it was due, I was in the Booz Allen office at 2 a.m. reworking the pricing, really kicking myself for doing this. But we ended up getting to the finish line. And then since it was such a good proposal, it led me on a journey of becoming a pricing ninja. So I ended up getting additional training around how you do cost and everything. So it was another experience of where, hey, I just said yes and then figured it out. But I was willing to take on that challenge and risk. One thing I try to teach from a leadership is around this fail bow is learned, a lot of times when you fail, some people go up and they cower in the corner. They kind of want to keep it quiet. Hey, I didn't do so good. I failed. I learned this technique. It's called like a fail bow, where you go like this. You own it. You take accountability. You say, hey, I failed. Great. What did I learn from it? And how am I going to make sure that it doesn't happen again? So that's one of the things that I would really say as you fail in your career, pay attention to, realize, what do I learn there? So one of the others is this recovering perfectionist, the term. I don't know if anybody's heard of it. I'm not really good at this. This is the whole, hey, deliver, fix it, whatever. I still struggle with this one. But I'm getting better where, hey, not everything's got to be perfect. You can go and you can do it, move on, learn, and everything there. So my fear of failure was actually presented to me through a coaching session as a career derailer. And they actually said, hey, your fear of failure is restricting you from taking risks. So it was an eye-opening thing to realize that I had this, fear that was really limiting me from a career standpoint. One others is everyone teaches you, hey, watch your leaders, learn what they do, pick up on what you like. One thing I learned on early on was actually pay attention to other leaders and learn what you don't like. Right? So if you see a leader or a colleague doing something and you don't like it, take it into your mind and actually make sure you don't do the same thing. So that was something I learned that it kind of stuck with me, that I watch other leaders or other people and say, hey, I don't want to do that. Hey, that guy's a jerk, or hey, he doesn't approach this situation. Make sure I don't do it. Might be a little bit hard, but some additional truths. I talked a little bit about, bad news doesn't get better with age. The more you try to fix it without telling people, it's going to get worse and worse, and then it's going to blow up. So be honest, be upfront. You're going to gather and gain a lot more trust and respect. If you own it, let people know. Key thing there is when you provide the bad news, don't just provide the bad news, but come with a plan on how you're going to fix it, how you're going to make sure it doesn't happen again. This one's been pretty cool for me to kind of realize is nobody has it figured out. Nobody really knows anything. Everyone is trying, right? So you look at meetings, you may look at kind of a boardroom of all of these senior executives meeting. I can tell you, nobody in that room knows what they're doing. Everyone is having that same thought of like, what the hell do we do here? That's something that I've seen. Has anybody heard of the Plato's principle? So you actually get promoted to your level of incompetence. So you think everybody that's been promoted, if they stall, it's because they're incompetent. They can't move on to the next role. So as you see, just keep that in mind that, they're figuring it out too. They don't know shit. Sorry. They don't know anything. Another one I've actually read recently, nobody cares as much as you think. Everybody is self-absorbed with themselves, right? So if you're in a meeting and you make a minor mistake, as soon as the people leave that room, they're not going to remember that. They're going to move on. They're going to worry about themselves. They're going to worry about, hey, do I have food in my teeth or whatever. So that's been helpful in my, recovering perfectionist stage of self-growth. Another thing, never say no, say not yet. I don't know if I've ever said not yet. I've just said, yeah, I'll do it and I'll figure it out. It's led to some situations where I was probably too overwhelmed, panic attack, and had to actually go back and then say, hey, can I just postpone this a little bit? But try not to ever say no. And then find a mentor and become a sponsor. So it took me 15 years to learn that there's a difference between a mentor and a sponsor. A mentor is someone's going to help you grow in your own personal career, help you, realize some of your flaws, some of the things that you need to work on. A sponsor is that person who's going to put their own career and their own, success on the line when they're in the room, right? So they're going to say, hey, I think Justin should be promoted. I can vouch for him. That's a sponsor, and it doesn't come very easily. You've got to find the right people who are willing to kind of take that risk on you. I left this in here because I don't think that's Virginia Tech. Is it? I don't think so. This picture right there, that I don't even know why I put it in here. Maybe my notes said something about pictures with slides, but I thought it'd be funny. It sort of, but I don't think there's like the cathedral on any buildings. So I know I got a few minutes left, so I'll talk through this. Some of the projects that I've been actually fortunate to work on through my career. Some of these are, acronyms. They don't have the actual name. Based on some of the work we've done, I can't really share a lot of that stuff. But early on as a developer, we built an application called eSubpoena. Back in the old days, when they delivered an administrative subpoena, they had to fax it. And it took about 60 to 90 days to get results. So working with some other partners, we actually built a system where we sent the administrative subpoena via JSON electronically, which you guys are like, oh, that's normal. Well, back in the days, that was new. And it actually changed the way the FBI delivered administrative subpoenas. They didn't have to wait 60 to 90 days anymore. They got it within minutes. And it really changed kind of how they do some criminal investigations. FVP, this was a big data project. We took in a lot of data and actually presented it in a non-proprietary format. And it all had to do with electronic surveillance. So it was pretty awesome on what we were able to do. CVIP, sort of within FVP, we had an effort where we assisted the identification of victims and learned a lot around the impact that had on child victims, which I learned in that program. That once you've been identified as a victim, you're notified every time an image surfaces of you, and it's actually part of the healing process. So the fact that we were able to support that was awesome. Insider threat is another one. Was able to work that. That was less around the technical side. It was much more around the team and the client relationships. So I was able to come in and help improve that so that we could continue the work. So that was really, really awesome there. Some of the stuff we're doing right now, we're doing some work with a research agency. This has been a really fun project, but also a lesson in relationships and who we want to work with. But we're actually helping build a visualization platform to show data acquired via offensive cyber purposes for a defensive use. So it's could be really impactful work, and we're pretty excited about it. Fierce Penguin, that's the unclassified name. You can Google it. It is developing software to take cyber tools from the mission side and put them out into the gray and blue space. So I'm able to work with that project, which is something I never even knew existed until several years ago. And then I talked a little bit about the joint venture and partnerships. That's one other thing that I'm really, really enjoying and building the relationships to find out how we can help support other people. A little bit about full visibility, about 125. We do work around software development, engineering, AI, and then we've got a niche around offensive cyber that we're really focused on building. And the three founders in the room are all Virginia Tech grads. So that's the connection. We quickly, meshed really well based on our shared experiences. So for you guys, invest in one relationship every single week, right? And that means spending the time connecting with that person and really try to build that. Choosing hard things that align with your purpose. And then one other thing is doing the right thing when no one is watching. Doing the right thing is often the harder thing. And a lot of people end up doing the easy thing, which isn't the right thing. So that's one thing I kind of challenge you guys and do it when no one's watching. 5 lessons to take away. Talked about it a lot, relationships. That's how you're going to get into a career that matters and into roles that you want to do, is having those friends, having those people that you've shown that they can trust you. Again, be kind, treat people as they should be treated. And then the other thing to kind of final is leadership is a practice. It's not a title, right? It is things you do as opposed to what's next to your name. So with that, thank you. And you can open it up, Kurt, for any questions.
Do you want to handle the questions? Or do you want me to? You have the questions online, I guess.
Yeah.
You had support when you talked about your time at BT. Some students say, hey, that happened to me, similar story here. So you had support there.
Yeah.
So people in Zoom, do you have any questions?
Or in the room.
You can write in the chat.
Thank you for the presentation. You're mentioning like you're having a difficult time like finding a job like at the beginning of your career. Like given the current situation, the job market, how do you like succeed in like in the interviews if you get in interviews? Because I've done some interviews but haven't been successful to make it to get like a full-time position.
So I had in-person interviews at my time at Virginia Tech, and that's where I got the job offer. Now in the hiring world, it's much more, for us, it's a lot of virtual, quick, 30-minute interviews, right? We're interviewing people in 30 minutes and making a decision. And that's a lot of the case. I would, if you're able, I would request an in-person interview. See if you can meet the person. But also, with the tools that are out there today, it's, making sure that you're putting in the extra effort around developing a cover letter, not just applying through, clearance jobs or whatever job boards. Go that extra step. Write a cover letter. Find out who you have to send it to. Going back to the old days where when you finish, write a letter, right? I will say 75% of the interviews I do, they don't follow up with a thank you note. And the 25% that do, you remember it. Early on, I interviewed a young developer, and he printed out, 15 pages of the code he wrote. And in the interview, he offered to go through that. So what that showed me is they went the extra mile, they went the extra step. So I will say, as you look to apply to jobs and do interviews, try to find something that is that extra step beyond just doing the interview.
Yeah, but most of the interviews are online, and I think recently I had one with 30 minutes, and I don't know how to exactly like get through the point. Like I'm trying to, I say the answer's right, but I don't know how to code in a way like I am the person out of all like the pool of people they're trying to interview.
Did you follow up after?
Yes, I did. When I asked them for feedback and a thank you note.
And didn't get anything?
I got it today, but just some feedback, and it was like, thank you for like the thank you note.
Okay. Have you developed a plan with that feedback around how you're going to do the next one?
I'm thinking of it right now, like when I get the next interview, but like I don't know like what questions are there in an interview. Like it's randomized, and I do as much as I can, but it's like very unpredictable these days.
Yeah, right. Job market's really tough right now. My advice is do one thing extra to try to separate yourself.
Thank you.
Other questions from the room or online? Yeah, well, we're bringing the mic what I'll say is like here at Virginia Tech, you should be in a project course and then talk about that. That should differentiate you. I know my students that work in my lab, that's always a key differentiator for them, that they did something outside of class. So
Shameless.
Thank you, Justin. Thanks. Great presentation. I guess one of the things you as a leader, what do you like to see from students and others that are in the workforce today as they're trying to grow in their career? Is it providing examples, kind of getting ahead of certain things, trying to show certain things that kind of help elevate their career?
Yeah. Right. You want to see diversity of what they've done, right? And that's where one thing I look at is it's not just, hey, am I a great developer? It's what else have I done? You know, what else have I kind of taken a risk on? And again, you know, separating yourself a little bit different, right? Because you're going to get 10 candidates that, you know, they've all got a really good pedigree from undergrad and they've got good experience. But one thing that separates is, you know, going above and beyond and doing a little bit more when you can. So.
Good. You got one online?
I got advice.
Advice?
Yeah. So I have an advice from Adrian Bivens in chat. So he says, figure out what value you can bring to the company. Just probe on the problems they are facing and see how you can help. You know, just be proactive in determining what problems they may be facing and how you can help.
Yeah. In that, I would add to it, don't be critical of the company. One thing I learned is until you get in those shoes, you don't know what they're facing, right? And you have to respect the position they're in. You can go to a company and you can say, hey, I noticed you have a problem. Your website sucks. I can do this. You know, you might not know that they've tried to fix that. You know, you have to understand additional context. So I would just caution a little bit there.
Yes.
Until you've been in those shoes, you don't really understand what they're facing. But
Good point.
yeah, don't be critical. You know, show how you can provide value by helping them or benefiting them.
So you talked about a situation where the engineer wasn't able to reach a deadline, and you didn't want to throw him under the bus.
Yeah.
As in that scenario, you were a manager or a leader. I guess my question is, suppose from the perspective of you were an engineer on his team, how would you avoid throwing him under the bus without throwing yourself under the bus?
Little clarification, I didn't throw him under the bus with the client, right? I also didn't throw him under the bus with his team members, one, because they weren't really impacted. They weren't waiting on him for anything, right? It was kind of a singular project, he would work on it. So I didn't throw him under the bus with the client. I then met with him right after that, right? And said, hey, how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? What can I do? Turns out he was dealing with some other issues. He actually transitioned off the project. But in a situation, you know, say that happens, as I'm setting up teams, I focus a lot around communication and a lot around, hey, if you're working together, let's all talk through a problem, you know, and we do a lot of daily scrums, and it's, you know, hey, if you identify a problem that is holding up somebody else, you have to have that communication up front, right? So try to avoid having to throw an engineer under the bus because you've provided the space for them to say, hey, I'm struggling way before that. And in this situation, he was working on his project by himself. It was a little bit different, but so.
Can I ask a similar follow-up? All right, so yeah, a lot of companies, they kind of do a big group chat for the team. And I guess, yeah, that helps with transparency. But sometimes it feels a little awkward because it's like, okay, this thing is really specific. So I don't know. I mean, some people, they prefer to keep everything in the group chat, and some people prefer to work, you know, one-on-one. Do you have a preference in that regard?
So my question is, if anybody's been on a group Slack, I have no idea how the hell you stay up to date with what's going on and do your work, right? So like Town Square or whatever, right? So yeah, I do not like those big group channels. So that's where you try to structure it where you may have kind of a front end channel, you may have a microservices channel, you may have a data channel. I really try to set rules around, hey, what goes in this channel, what doesn't, right? And foster and be very deliberate in building that space for those engineers to come separate in a separate, private DM with you, so that they don't feel shamed or anything. That's what so I don't like the big group channels. COVID, we tried the old keeping a Teams room open the whole time and letting people come in and out and talk. Didn't work. But I'm, I think I've been comfortable with multiple communication channels for different project teams and different colleagues, right? So whether that's text, when you're in a classified space, you've got 3 different networks that you can get email on. Then you got Teams and you got Slack, text, you got phone calls. I've really focused on making sure that I'm comfortable working with all of those. And I do catch myself sometimes sending a text and it's like, hey, should I send an email? So it's, yeah.
Other questions? See everybody. Anything online?
Yep.
Oh, one more here.
I had a question. So you said,
So you talked
you said
about
earlier in your
networking
talk
and
that
building
management-
relationships. I want to know, how do you approach someone without the thought that you want to get a job referral, but you want to build a meaningful relationship with them? How do you approach them without having, even though you want to network with them because you want to grow in your career, you want to probably get a promotion or something like that. But how do you make sure that you don't just approach them and you don't give them a sense that you're just talking to them because you want to get this
Job.
get this job offer or something like that?
So one thing I've learned is people love to talk about themselves, right? I just spent 45 minutes, didn't get through everything. I have found that other leaders love to share their experiences and their advice with you. So my recommendation would be to approach that relationship or conversation with the theme of how could I connect with you to have you teach me some things. I'd love to learn about your experiences. I'd love to hear what your advice is. Less around, hey, I'm trying to build it, right? Put it into their mind that they're helping you. And then be prepared when you go there. Early on, I approached a VP at Booz Allen and I said, hey, would you be open to a monthly conversation with me just so I could kind of learn more about your career? I'm envious of kind of where you are. I'd love to get there someday. And I actually would prepare prior to that. And I had questions to ask during the time, right? So that's one thing is just don't say, hey, can you help me? And then go and not bring them any problem. Truly bring them a problem that you want their advice on. And then you could build it because they're going to enjoy giving you advice and sharing your experiences. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you can slip in your conversation like, hey, I really don't have a job. Do you have anything?
I try that.
Subtly, yeah. After you've met with them a couple times and listened to them ramble. Yeah.
Thank you.
Another one online?
Yeah.
Don't forget to ping them on LinkedIn too after, or ask them if you can.
Yeah.
Jason, you want to chime in?
Yeah. You said earlier in your talk, can you hear me?
Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Are you raising your hand?
I'm trying to talk. Let me try
I
to
cannot
switch
hear
to
you.
my,
We have the mic.
yeah.
Sound turned off.
Yeah, I think I know. Maybe I know why. Just a second.
Right in the chat.
Try now, Jason.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you can.
Okay, so you said earlier in your talk that management was adopting leadership is actually leading, and you also said that leading in your whatever your current role happens to be is the way to go. Do you have any thoughts on skipping adult babysitting and going straight to the leadership part for anyone who's interested in skipping the adult leadership part. I mean, not leadership, but the adult babysitting part.
So skipping management. Skipping management and going right to leadership. I think they're one and the same. I think in a leader, you also have to manage. So I don't think you have the option to skip and just go right into leadership. There's an aspect where you have to manage people, at least in my experiences, right? You can go into a leadership where you don't directly manage someone, but you're still doing management of some sort. So I don't think it's an option to really skip the management piece. You need to have those skills. And, you know, there's going to be a time where you got to make sure it may not be a direct report, it might be a colleague, but you have to manage them to make sure that they're doing what you need. You know, and you have to, one thing I talked about a little bit about being influential. That's, you know, manipulative is what some people would say, but it's influencing people to do what you want them to do. And you may have to do that through leadership or management.
One more question. How do you find the causes you want to work for, or things that interest you?
Yeah, I had a sense like that question would come up of like, how did I get to work on some of those projects? I have no idea how they came. Like, to be honest, they just happened to be there. Right. When I got the job with Booz Allen, I had no idea what I was going to do. Right. I showed up in Reston into their office up there first day, and they actually handed me a Cold Fusion book and said, figure this out. Right. In Cold Fusion, it's embarrassing to say that I was a Cold Fusion developer for a little bit. But I don't have an answer for that. I don't. They were there. But I think it was, I would say, helped a little bit by my curiosity. So when I meet with different people, I ask a lot around, hey, what are you doing? What, you know, and I really like to find the end of the internet sometimes. And so I think in a business career, it's going and talking with people and asking, what do they have? Right. And you have to ask that question. So, you know, I don't necessarily know how they popped up, but I know some of the projects actually popped up because I was asking questions and someone's like, hey, I'm working on this. And it's like, hey, is there any way I could help you? So that might be part of it.
Thank you. Any other question?
Any more? Oh,
Another one?
one more. Probably the last one. Oh,
Good.
What do you do on your spare time?
What?
What spare time, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. What do? I haven't run a little bit, but I've just finished running 270 something days in a row. I try to stay somewhat healthy, but I got a dad's group in the neighborhood, and one of the guys was like, hey, let's go out and grab beers. And I'm like, I don't have a free night until March 24th. And he said, are you okay? I said, yeah, but you know, two girls both have dance. My son plays lacrosse. So it is family outside of work. I will say my 8-year-old with Down syndrome, she goes through this IEP process in school. And I was really frustrated around the IEP documents, which for anybody, they print it out and they hand it to you and everything's all over the place. So I actually built an application using Claude and GitHub Copilot. So I actually built an application using Claude over the last like 3 weeks. And then I went to the IEP meeting yesterday and tried to show the app, and they said, we're going to turn off the projector and use paper. So I was pretty hot yesterday after working all that time. But you know, I try to continue. I read a lot of stuff, not books or anything like that, but constantly trying to stay up on current events and stuff. Yeah.
Lifelong learning, right?
Right. Yeah.
Any other questions online? No. Well, let's thank Justin for joining us today.